We'll begin with our next panel discussion on changing landscape of skill gaming in India in next 5 minutes. On changing landscape of skill gaming in India, I would like to welcome our panelist on stage, Mr. Dushyant Saraswat from Hunter Games, Mr. Firasat Durrani from Loco, Mrs. Nruthya Madappa 314 Capital, Mr. Paavan Nanda WinZO, and Mr. Sudhir Kamath Nazara. To moderate this session, I would like to call upon Mr. Anirudh Rastogi from Ikigai Law. Over to Mr. Rastogi.
Hi everyone, good morning. Very, very happy to see a full house and starting out on time. Very interesting panel. We're going to be discussing the changing landscape of skill-based gaming in India. The landscape has been changing, I guess, over the last 3-4 years, and with a lot of developments in 2023, we're already set to see, I think, a very dynamic landscape, a shifting landscape for the rest of the year. So why don't I start out with asking the panelists their predictions for 2023. How do you think the landscape is going to change, continue to change? Opportunities, how do you find your businesses kind of placed in that changing dynamic? Shall we start with you, Firasat, and then go one by one?
Sorry, I thought I was the most unsharply dressed person here, so by virtue of that, I would get like the last chance. But yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for having us, and thank you for welcoming us. It's a pleasure to be here. I've always noticed products, the wane and wax of products growing and reaching their full potential under the influence of three clear indicators. One's an investment interest, the other is the amount of product innovation, and the third is user recognition. Everything revolves around the triangular spade of this equation. So far we have seen a bunch of investment interest and product innovation, as you've yourself observed over the last few years. However, because of the current regulation conversation that that the government's exploring along with key industry leaders, I feel because recognition is, regulation leads to recognition. And as a result of that, there is going to be a bunch of user recognition to the effect that it's going to in turn increase and again boost the other two parts of the equation, which is the product innovation around it as well as the investment around it. That's principally what I'm excited about over the last few years, especially since the regulation conversation has begun. We've noticed things that we never saw before, like e-sport courses getting sold online. A couple of years ago, I would have had to fight a really talented esports player's dad to give them a chance to play a skilled game at an esports event, which is perhaps India's largest at that point of time, but the parents would not understand or not get it. I'm talking about the recognition being missing there largely. But that fast forwarded to now at a point of time where institutions are offering courses for people to develop a career in esports. It's like a 360-degree in my head, and I can only see it go up and up this year, and that's principally what I'm most excited about. Who wants to take this out?
Okay. So in summary, 2023 is about regulation.
So, hi, I'm Paavan, co-founder of WinZO. I think Firasat very beautifully put it, and I think he summed up also very well. Essentially, we need to understand that the panel is about growth of skill gaming industry, right? And game of skills is a very interesting industry that happens or is happening here in India, and it's at the cusp of exponential growth. What we need to understand here is that India is one of the very few countries that does not allow any kind of gambling, lottery, betting. That is illegal, but promotes game of skill or wagering on game of skill. What that does essentially is that all kinds of monetizations that in other countries are either in the form of gambling or in the form of in-app purchases converges here in India in the form of game of skills. And of course, the players have been operating, the industry has been operating for last 10, 12, 15 odd years. WinZO in itself has been operating now for close to 5 years. But what 2023 per se is going to bring is going to be phenomenal clarity on the regulatory front. Something that is super crucial, right? And we've all seen seeds of that in the first 2 months of the year itself, wherein we started off the year, I think on the 6th of Jan, MeitY came up with the draft amendments to the IT guidelines, where they clearly called out how they're thinking of setting up and regulating the online gaming industry or the game of skills industry. Then on the 1st of Feb, even in the budget, how the Honorable Finance Minister has carved out online gaming and has really separated it and segregated it against betting or online. I think these are some phenomenal strokes in our favor as an industry. And now what this is going to do is essentially give clarity to the whole sector. Of course, we've been operating with full clarity from an execution standpoint, but like Firasat also mentioned, it's going to now let investors, retail investors, institutional investors have more certainty around their outcomes as well, right? We feel once we have more clarity around the sector, around taxation, for example, again, GST is a topic which I think should get solved in the next couple of months. There'll be a lot of companies which will actually go ahead and go public. I think there are a bunch of profitable companies in the game of skill sector which are probably waiting for just these regulatory certainties, and then they have all the wherewithal to go public. Them going public, generating results will in return, of course, attract newer, more fresh capital to the early stage ventures. And I think once you get capital, then of course gaming entrepreneurs can invest that capital into generating better content, of course hiring better quality talent, and overall growing the sector. Not just that, but I also feel once that flywheel sort of kicks in, there is nobody stopping Indian gaming entrepreneurs to go ahead and actually take on to some global territories as well. So in the next couple of years, we can see some of the Indian skill gaming companies to actually gain great market shares even in international waters.
Hi, Dushyant here. I'm one of the earliest people in real money gaming when back in the day quizzes were played for cash and won cash prizes with telco billing back in the day, right? And set that out. I've seen this industry for a very long time. It's almost like been 12, 15 years, and all of these regulatory changes that we're looking at optimistically today are belated, and I'm so happy it's happening because I have a very simple question to ask you. How many unicorns are there in the gaming space? Anybody has an answer in this country? You can say 4, one listed. And all of them are in the space of real money gaming. Almost all. Unless you'll see a portfolio like Nazara, which has real money gaming. So if the gaming industry in this country is largely around real money gaming, it is really, really important that everything comes together on clarity of regulations from the taxation purposes to a more unified kind of a view at state and central level. So it's great times that we're talking about it today, but one should understand the profundity of this particular business, and these businesses have grown really natively for India and by India. So cheers to the year ahead.
Thank you. So I'm going to urge Nruthya and Sudhir to touch upon certain aspects beyond regulation as well, right, as we speak about the year ahead.
So stepping away from regulation, I think you hit on a few different points, right? We've very painfully had to sit on the sidelines and not invest in real money gaming in particular because of this, but hopefully that changes. But broader, looking at 2023, I just wanted to look back on just how gaming has essentially exploded in India on both fronts, both the supply and the demand. We've of course created Indian games for India from the grounds up, but that consumer at the edge of everything, all the kind of infrastructure that has been laid we're seeing a very different en masse migration of a very new kind of customer continuously over the last 2 to 3 years into gaming. So that we're already the highest globally in number of downloads. The spread across different forms of revenue across gaming is also sort of evening out from in-app to RMG to beyond. Tipping and creators, following creators, I think we'll hear more from Loco in detail on the ways different forms of monetization are evolving. So as investors looking at this ecosystem, always, I know we say this every year, but there's really never been a better time to build for, to consume, and then of course to invest in gaming. So 2023 is just the cusp of it.
Anirudh, sorry, I will mention the regulation word once.
Can't keep away.
But then I'll move past it. So I think the biggest theme is obviously this year around regulation. But let me talk about what happens because of that, right? So I think with regulatory clarity, we think 2 or 3 trends will really dominate this year. I think one is a lot more scaling up in terms of user acquisition and marketing efforts. A lot of kind of hush-hush marketing which used to happen is now going to be much more open, much more in-face. That fundamentally will lead to, I think, a lot of growth in terms of users or time spent by users. And second, I think as this grows, more regulatory pressure will also weed out a lot of the smaller players and lead to both M&A and consolidation in the industry. And we think both of these things will happen in skill gaming as referred to real money gaming. If I just step back one little bit and say skill gaming also refers to other games which need skill and not just real money. We think there the big shift is what the previous panel was talking about, which is a shift to purchases, IAP especially, happening a lot more in India. And I think that's a big trend which maybe RMG as a sector may not need to see, but a lot of others will see. And that's going to be a big thing.
Thank you. So since all of you have really emphasized on, it's clear that regulation is going to be the biggest driver of growth, clarity, investment in the space in this year. Let's evaluate that a little more, right? And I have 2 specific themes that I want to kind of, talk about a little more. One is, and I'll start with you, Nruthya, that, the rules, while welcome, do a great job at, strive to bring in a lot of clarity on various fronts, but I'm not sure they attempt to settle the skill versus chance debate fully, right? And the uncertainty at the stake level will still obviously continue. To what extent do you believe, one, would you have liked to see more? Second is, do you think that these, even this movement at the central level, to what extent is it going to influence regulation at the stakes, policy at the stakes? And you as an investor who's unfortunately kept out, right? How does this country kind of get you guys interested, right? What more do you want to see?
I think that clarity, we also, by the way, to just draw parallels, invest very deeply in fintech, right? Which is also in any sort of field where you're building and suddenly you see this kind of growth spurt with millions, hundreds of millions of consumers coming on board who the government and the regulators view as not being fully educated on the instrument that they're working with, whether it's on the fintech side or in gaming, with the kind of game that they're playing. They will try and step in and build the rule framework around it. And I think it is a little too much for us to expect that level of clarity without having a very clear, continuous dialogue with them. So a lot of the leaders here, of course, the reason we talk a lot about regulation is they've played a very large role in also educating the regulator on how to build some of these frameworks, whether it is fighting the regulation after it is laid down, whether it is being challenged, in courts by different states, regardless of what the national regulation is. This is a space that impacts an enormous number of consumers. It will continue to only grow. It will also potentially go global. There is a very, very large amount of money at stake here that, of course, profitable companies are being built around. So the government will try to regulate, try to understand, and try to put the frameworks around it. But is there a clear line of sight that we have? We're early stage investors, right? So for us, even if we have visibility into the next year or so of some concrete thing, we would start betting. And very frankly speaking, we genuinely don't have that. And I don't know if the folks here welcome the changes and welcome the formalization, but if you would ask us straight up if we have a clear line of sight on when this debate will ever be finalized or whether the state will, respond to what is laid out in the center, I don't think we have all the answers. As far as investors are concerned, I see you sort of stepping in globally and otherwise extraordinarily interested in turning its sights on India, or already has in the last few months. We had Kraft on in the room before. They've stepped in such an incredibly strong way to be able to build an homegrown ecosystem out of here, both on the supply and demand side, and that capital will continue to flow into the next few years, both strategic and institutional.
I think this is exactly what I was expecting. I was not expecting more, because we need the conversation to begin first and then head out ahead in the right kind of manner, that is both with and without the kind of stakeholders that we don't need coming into the situation, because it's been historically we've understood that too much regulation at just the beginning is kind of a misstep, and I'm really not disappointed with the speed at which this conversation is evolving, because it's important to note that government regulation is more welcome in areas which are actually quite grey to the rest of the world. That's not the case so much with these things. Everyone, before a game evolves, everyone from the publisher to the player of that game to the audiences watching to the people who base their IPs on their game, everyone kind of recognizes the differences in themselves. And I think the government is right to wait for the conversation to begin on what kind of monetization models are going to evolve, because one of them is going to be really different from the other. And I think as a result of that, that's the point we're going to see more things coming in, and that's exactly how I would like to see it proceed. Not like here's a bunch of rules from here on which are unanimous and do not differentiate between one kind of business and the other. So I think it's on the right step.
Sure. No, I agree with you to a large extent, but just want to point out that the conversation is not entirely that new either, right? I mean, it's a conversation we've been having for many, many years, and I would throw in one more question into the mix for Paavan and Sudhir, but feel free to respond to the earlier question as well alongside. I would like to explore a little more about the SRB mechanism that's being proposed, right? And obviously putting in place an SRB is I think the design of this mechanism is going to be important for its effectiveness. So what would an ideal SRB mechanism look like? What are your views about having a singular SRB versus multiple SRBs? How do we best operationalize? What are the problems you anticipate in operationalizing these? So either of you, if you would like to take this up. And
I'll go first. So the SRB structure is, I think the multiple SRB structure is welcomed. Earlier, of course, the concern was that how about only a single SRB with different industry players also part of it, us showing and pushing our data, IPs, everything into the same can lead to leakages, can lead to violation of IPs. I think multiple SRB structure, to a certain extent, addresses that. We need to also understand that the roles the SRB should be really playing, right? I mean, I think it's about containing any kind of offshore betting, gambling, basically illegal entity to operate freely in India the way it is happening currently, right? It is also about containing anti-money laundering. It's about, let's say a new player just comes in, launches a very gambling or a betting kind of a format, operates as a fly-by-night operator and leaks, right? I think so. Consumer grievances, something. I think those are the roles that multiple SRB structure should play. One particular challenge or apprehension that we envisage around pre-registration is that, I mean, just in case the guidelines come in and they mention that every game developer has to first share their game details, game IP, data, everything with an SRO, and only then, once the SRO approves, only then they will be allowed to launch their game. I think that can be really onerous, right? One, of course, it will have a direct impact on the protection of my IP. I mean, information get leaked. I mean, and it's very hard to get stuff patented in India. We all know that, right? I think what's important is that SRB should establish and have some kind of powers envisaged to them, wherein they can go about inspecting any particular player. But at least for players, and especially mature players, let's say like WinZO, which is already a proven track record. We've been operating 100 plus games. We launch one new game every week. It's going to be very difficult for us to every time before launching a game go to an SRB for an approval, right? For players who are the good players, or the mature players who have actually shown some kind of credibility, already invested in this sector, they should be allowed to give some kind of a self-declaration and then go about launching their game of skills the way we've been continuing to do for last 5 years. And if SRB has an issue with that, they can of course reach out to us and we'll be happy to support them with whatever data they need. I think that is one important aspect that we need to definitely table it, and ideally should be addressed when the final guidelines come out.
Yeah, no, definitely an important one.
I'll just add to that. First, I think for the benefit of those in the audience who don't know what SRBs are, so the government has basically suggested the creation of self-regulatory bodies or self-regulatory organizations, SRB, SRO, same thing. And the idea is every company or every game publisher who's part of the real money gaming industry should be registered with them. Each game should be registered with them. I think what the government is clearly trying to do is to say that rather than the government directly regulating every single detail of the industry, they rather let neutral or independent bodies related to the industry set up mechanisms by which they regulate. Which I think as a design works with. I think it's similar to sort of what happens in the ad industry with ASCII and others. I think one question which this leaves open though is the government has not yet defined what is allowed, what is not allowed. If I take a parallel from a different industry, say medicines, if you're selling a Vicks Vaporub kind of a medicine, you can sell it over the counter, no license needed, nothing. But if you're selling a cancer drug, you need to be registered, and the person who's selling it, the chemist, needs to be registered and have certain degrees. Here the government has not specified what can be done. It said that SRO or SRB will figure that out. Now the challenge of course is that if you have multiple SRBs, which there will be and there should be, as Paavan said, each of them may have a slightly different interpretation. So you could end up with like a forum shopping kind of a thing where I have a game which is maybe on the edge of what I think is legit. I may take it to one SRB which says no, I may take it to another one which says yes and it's not. Now how does that get resolved? I think as Firasat said, this is something which will evolve. I think it's better the government does not go in with too heavy a touch and this evolves. But I think sometime in the next, maybe looking at current speed, 12, 24, 36 months, I think there will be a set of precedents or directives which will come from the government which will clarify this. And I know Anirudh and Ikigai do a lot of work in this, and hopefully they can guide the government or regulators in this regard. But eventually there will need to be that clarity which comes before, say, investors, especially slightly more risk-averse investors, can actually step into this space. I think that.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add on to it. I think definitely, but like Firasat also mentioned, and to Sudhir's point, it will be very hard to expect, and I think probably unfair as well, to expect a government to come up with like list of 10 rules or even quantitative rules that these are the litmus test. If a game passes through it, only then it's game of skill. Because we are thriving on an innovation, right? I mean, every game is different. Every time you send a release, you send an update in that particular game, its likelihood or the predominant effect of skill to chance can vary, right? And there are enough judgments in the code. Supreme Court has of course clearly mentioned what kind of game of skills are, right? So essentially there has to be a predominant effect, and each and every game, each and every format, each and every way games are getting monetized has to be looked at differently. And the government should probably also take a leaf from the code and have very overarching, very high level guidance, and not do something very heavy-handed that might end up killing innovation.
No, a point very well taken. I think in the gaming space, minor tweaks to your UI and UX can have implications on what is perceived as a game of skill or game of chance. Increasing the number of players in a fantasy sport format or reducing the number of players can have implications. So obviously, it's I think an SRB mechanism is important. In fact, what would be interesting is like a competitive dynamic within the SRBs also. From a point of view, there will be some which will be more lenient, there will be some which will probably orient themselves to certain specific formats or specific segments within the industry. So I think that competitive dynamic is also going to be very interesting and hopefully effective for the industry. Dushyant, I saw you leaning in. Did you want to add to this, or I do have a separate question for you though. And I want to take us to kind of your domain, which is gamification. I pulled out a very old tweet from you in 2017, which said that gamification is going to grow faster than gaming. I want to know that if that, to your mind, stands true even now in 2023. What are you seeing in that space? Could you elaborate?
So, first of all, I'll just define what is gamification. Gamification is the utilization of hyper-casual games to lead to a commerce outcome. Typically, it can be aimed in any direction. It can be led for training and education, but largely, let's remain on the revenue side today and talk about the hardcore revenue, which is hyper-casual games now feature inside Amazon, which is an e-commerce and payment company. Every time you do a Google Pay transaction, you get a scratch card. That's a little tiny hyper-casual game. So what's happening out there? Why did Flipkart acquire a gaming company called McMocha? Why are commerce and payment companies acquiring gaming companies? I can tell you the China example. AG Tech, the largest skill-based and lottery company acquired by Alibaba Group. For what reason? Now this is a very different thing. We're zooming out now and we're saying, what are the games you're playing? Probably you guys haven't played a real money game per se, but you may have played a game recently which might be scratching that scratch card or spinning the wheel and then answering a question. So what is the most played game in the country? It's not Ludo, it's probably one of these games. A spin the wheel, a scratch card is what millions of users are doing. And if you zoom out, it is a content category called games. What do games do? Games create value by getting a hyper-attentive lean-forward moment of the consumer, right? And dopamine hits. Let's be very clear about it. Dopamine hits. Okay? The little tiny dopamine hits is the nature of the business we are all in. And these dopamine hits previously were used, and that value which was being generated of that attentive, entertaining moment was being used to ask the consumer to pay for a game. Okay, I'm giving you this entertainment, now you pay me a subscription in app purchase, or like let's take it to the competitive money out, money in kind of a model. What does gamification do though? Every time that Amazon runs that spin the wheel that allows you to win a new Honda scooty, etc. Honda not only pays for that scooty which is going out, it also pays way more to Amazon as advertising value because there's so many eyeballs who spent more time with you. Remember that one ad of Liril on YouTube. I don't know why I'm watching Liril ads. Something else you know. Okay, but the one ad is like 30 paisa for a 10-second ad. But if you were to offer this to Hindustan Lever and other guys who want to engage the consumer, you can say he's going to play your instead of that ad. If it was an interactive ad where you could actually just play a little bit and everybody can play. That's why hyper casual games, no skill, only luck. Yeah, fun, all free, never pay. Who pays for it? The brand pays for it. So what are we talking about? We're talking about utilization of this content category of gaming, but the value which is being generated from gaming is being exploited and not taken from the gamer, but from the brands who have open checkbooks and unlimited budgets to get that attentive moment that leads to 2x to 3x greater transactions when you give a reward at the end of it. How does it work? It works on the principles of gaming. You want to play a game, so people click more. That's why Amazon runs games. Weird, right? You will not click upon another running shoe ad, but you will click, okay, spin the wheel and win this probably, right? So and this is all a very important thing for game developers and for game publishers, that you don't always have to take money from the consumer. If you don't do that, you also get rid of all the regulations. You take money from the advertisers. It's a martech play. So that's the fun. And back at Hunter Games, we built a middleware that allows everybody to add this because surely it's working and it works really, really well. So that is an interesting thing. I think it's a juxtaposition of this, and I won't be surprised if over time contests, etc. Our branded esports already has that, where the brands are paying, so that value chain is not always about getting money from Indians to pay for your content, but maybe Indians are the most valuable new internet user in the world, 60 million new internet users. No other country has so many new internet users on the planet, and nobody has so many new e-commerce users. Everybody wants to acquire them, and gaming is the solution to that. So that's
So that's interesting, and we as lawyers also are seeing a lot of innovation on the gamification front. Very interesting questions where, if you're using loyalty points to play a spin the wheel game for a commerce outcome, right? Possibly not gambling. But what if the loyalty points are actually redeemable in hard cash? Then does your evaluation change? What if those, the loyalty points are earned on the basis of a game outcome? Say, the more you play, the more you earn. Like, those are the kind of questions which make it a little fuzzy. But I love the fact that in this space, largely you do away with a lot of those questions. So that's why I think there's a lot of promise in this domain. Changing gears a little bit, since most of you, I think all of you are actually operating across multiple countries, and Nruthya, you as an investor, have probably that ringside view as well. How is the Indian consumer different from the average consumer in South Asia, Southeast Asia, wherever else you're operating? How's the landscape changing differently as well across different jurisdictions? So, this is a question I think each of you could possibly take. Yeah, please.
I'm seeing a lot of South Asia recently, and I think there are different nuances to the gamers. And first of all is the understanding of gaming as a go-to for entertainment, which is always like a secondary kind of a thing. They spend so much more on in-app purchases, it's mind-blowing. You look at Vietnam, there's 4G is also patched as 30% of the country is on 4G, but per capita, hours of gaming is the highest in South Asia. So they're like really passionate about that, and they spend on things which are very difficult for us to think of yet. I think of getting in-app purchases for cosmetic things, etc., and all of that. But all this is changing very fast. Look at the great successes we've had on all of those. But I think there are some cultural nuances, and I think gaming is still, I still say this, that pre-inflection, it hasn't reached the penetration levels, which are very, very far away, and will be much, much later as the dominant entertainment form.
Sorry, what is the in-app purchases for cosmetics example?
I mean cosmetic items inside the game.
Inside the game.
The better armor and all of that. Or like for example, Kakao Talk, right? A messenger platform makes its money only from stickers, which is difficult in India to match.
Firasat, would you like to?
Hello. Yeah. I want to take this question from a content POV, because that's what Loco does. It's live game streaming on IPs that are owned and distributed by giant AAA publishers in the first place, and some of these are the largest gaming companies in the world. India, to that effect, stands as the world's best laboratory for everything that's smartphone, except the segregation, the kind of AAA titles at the top. There are only two kinds of games that actually work in India. They're either mobile FPS. I'm staying away from the other, spectrum of skill gaming. One's mobile FPS, and the other is open universe games. Mobile FPS games like PUBG and Free Fire, which Indian audiences have seen in the past, and open universe games like GTA, like Minecraft or something. Outside of India and South Asia, from the Southeast Asia, we have seen a lot of content adoption for strategy games like Dota, LOL, etc. From the Middle East and North African regions, it's split up into, even though two other regions in the world are exactly the same when it comes to mobile penetration as well as user behavior. The Middle East, North African region and the Indian region, if you compare the top downloaded games in both of these regions, it's like a like-to-like comparison, which is a mind-blowing thing. The topmost casual game in these countries is also Ludo. The topmost mobile FPS games also happens to be games like PUBG, and other games like Clash of Clans, etc. are also quite equally popular. Moving on and staying away from the European Union and North African regions, the South American region also has a healthy mobile FPS affair. And I called India a really great laboratory earlier only to emphasize on this, that all of the pockets that are available and thriving outside the country are sort of already present in bits and pieces in various niches and communities in India. Even though India is not a PC market per se, GTA 5 gets tons of viewership still when creators start making content out of it. The same happens to Minecraft. In fact, right now, some of India's largest IP consumption when it comes to content stands in these games, because the FPS games are not so much available per se. So I'm noticing similar trends when it comes to countries that have as good a mobile penetration as India, and this is not just visible across the type of games only. This is also visible across in other spectrums, and like demographics, like the sizes of the games versus the interest versus the time spent in these games. That's what I've noticed. Does anyone want to add? Yeah.
Just a very small point, which is just around player behavior, around payments and being willing to pay for something. I think in India, one of the reasons why RMG does so well is because you're not taking an upfront fee of any kind. And Indians tend to be bargain hunters in that sense. So if somebody says you can pay 1,000 rupees and play as much Rummy as you want every month, the guy will say 1,000 rupees is too much. Sure. But he will happily play Rummy until he pays 10,000 bucks a month in fees. And that does happen quite a lot. I think the switch which is beginning to happen is now people being willing to pay upfront in the form of IAPs or purchasing cosmetics or others in the game, and that's across games, obviously, not just. I think that switch is beginning to happen. We see that in other markets, but in India, no.
Anyone else would like to add this? Okay.
Just quickly, I think we shouldn't underestimate the kind of leapfrogging in consumer behavior and purchase behavior that's happening in India broadly. So even outside of gaming, for instance, we've got a company called Loco FM that does audio-based podcasting. 22% of their paid customers every month, first transaction on the internet is a paid audio subscription. And that product exists 1.5 years ago. So my thing is like what an Indian consumer is changing every 6 months, and to the point that he made, like the point that he made about it being the best laboratory in the world, it also is because those consumption patterns and behaviors, A, don't mimic anything you've seen globally, B, are leapfrogging several kinds of purchase behavior, and C, are changing so rapidly you may be building finally in India things that will actually unlock very, very different consumption patterns globally. So really looking sort of beyond the West or even the East for that matter for models and comparables, while that held us back for a long time in how to raise money if you don't have a company that looks like you or a customer that looks like you anywhere elsewhere. Now we see that narrative flipping in a big way.
I have a follow-on question, Nruthya, for you. In your introductory remarks, you gave the example of UPI as well, and how that has also led to a change in consumption patterns. You just elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I think just like unbelievable frictionless, payment capabilities, right? And now we've got auto pay enabled on UPI. We'll have credit over UPI very quickly. So what that unlocks for just broadly purchase behavior, even outside of gaming, is just tremendous. And what it could mean within a play here, which again driven by dopamine hits, how you use your money, how you will access it, we're taking all of those friction.
And microtransactions.
And like just a few rupees, right? Like being able to do that without preloading a card or some other instrument is just phenomenal what you'll unlock. As we get deeper and deeper into tier 2, tier 3 and tier beyond, right, as well. What does that consumer look like?
Great. Paavan.
Yeah, I think microtransaction microtransaction based payments is the recipe of monetizing Indian audience. And we've of course seen that in gaming, now we've seen that in other formats as well. But to Sudhir's example, the reason why that person is okay to sort of pay a little bit and then play and then pay some more is because of UPI, people can actually pay as low as 10 rupees and enter into a game, and the kind of penetration that UPI offers is phenomenal, right? And absolutely free of cost. Versus some of the international consumers that still rely, to a large part on their wallets or credit cards or bank penetration. I think UPI has really unlocked the way India transacts, especially the tier 2, tier 5 audience, which contribute to 90% of the gaming audience. They are relying on UPI. I would say 80% of our transactions on WinZO happen on UPI. And like gaming per se is probably the largest contributor of microtransactions in India when done on UPI. Like on WinZO itself, we do 2 out of 500 UPI transactions that happen in India. Like we do 2 of them. So that's the scale we are talking about. Like we see people actually making 10 UPI transactions in a day. The user will add 50 bucks, will add 50 bucks, will add 50 bucks, play a game, then add 50 bucks, play a game, until that person lapses the 10 UPI transactions per day per user limit that is applied by the NPCI. And they'll have to do that because every time there is a IPL fantasy match, you see UPI success rate actually reduces, and that's because of fantasy. You know, right after the toss for 15 minutes, the UPI success rate will actually reduce from 80% to 50%. To a certain extent, where NPCI actually had to say that we probably for gaming operators, we'll have to increase the limit from 0 rupees to up to 50 rupees. No gaming operators can actually take less than 50 rupees. So that's the phenomena we are talking about here in India, which is not possible anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, fascinating. Sudhir, I take you, see you taking notes. Do you want to add to this, or that's what you reserve that for later? Yeah, Nruthya, did you? Oh, okay. All right. So over to my last question for the day, and this is around Web3, and with the winter kind of continuing, the government continuing to further, tighten the news. G20 also, like, we're still to see what kind of headway we will make over the year as far as crypto regulation is concerned. But I've always had a very strong conviction around Web3 gaming, and that's because even as lawyers, when we would give out opinions for whether a token is a security token or a utility token, it's always the easiest to give a clean opinion for a gaming use case, right? I mean, cryptos and gaming, seems these industries work kind of, there's so much synergy. So I want to ask you guys, what are the green shoots you are seeing, if at all, within the Web3 gaming space, and if not in India, then outside, right? Any insights on that?
Just start with that. So in Nazara, apart from real money, we also have lots of other games. Real money is actually a small component for us. So we have a game called World Cricket Championship, WCC 2 and 3. Almost 10 million monthly active users, one of India's largest games. It's cricket simulation. So while Web3 has been getting a lot of hype, I think the use cases were still relatively limited. This is something we've been working on for the last maybe 6 or 9 months in that game, and that actually goes live next week, I think, where you can actually buy an NFT of a particular player, and if you have that NFT, then you can include that player in your team in WCC when you play, and that gives you some benefits in the game. So there's a utility within the game of what happens. But at the same time, you have purchased an NFT which is tradable outside the game as well, and therefore you could get appreciation outside the game. So we think this kind of use case, which, and I'm sure there are tons of other games out there which are incorporating NFTs in different ways, but as these utility cases emerge, and for us, what we are sure we'll start to see is a lot of players who are normal WCC players, cricket fans, nothing to do with NFT, but they see this happening, and they will certainly start getting curious about what is NFT, how do I get this benefit, and they will actually start transacting possibly on other NFTs as well. So I think that will begin to emerge, and maybe in some ways the use cases will begin to catch up with the hype in that sense.
Paavan, would you like to add to this? And then
I think it's important to segregate Web3 from crypto, right? Here in India, I think that's very critical because, Web3 in itself is a very powerful mechanism to really unlock a lot of value, right? I think in gaming per se, currently the game developer or the gaming company owns all the IPs, right? I might be buying a particular car in NFS, but at the end of the day, it's the EA Sports which is owning that car, right? And if, let's say, they decide to block my account, I cannot do anything with those assets that are locked inside it, right? Now, with me being able to actually interoperate those assets from one game to another, not only that, but also let's say sell the same asset to some other player in that particular game, that really unlocks the economy and the $200 billion global gaming revenue can actually become more than $1 trillion if anybody can trade any IAP asset of any game with anyone, right? I mean, that's very phenomenal. I think, so from a concept level, Web3 can bring in some really fantastic scale. We need to, of course, separate it from crypto, one, for the regulatory reasons, and as well as for the Indian audience. I think Indian audience is not comfortable with, launching dedicated crypto wallets and then going about buying NFTs. In fact, we should not even tell them that it's an NFT you are buying. We should just tell them that you are buying this beautiful card, or this sticker, avatar, whatever. Stay away from words like NFT and crypto, and everything has to either from an interface standpoint as well as from a transaction standpoint. It has to be in their local fiat currencies. You cannot expect them to buy anything in Ethereum and all of that. We are still a couple of years away from that, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think businesses used to love playing the Web3 card largely for the funding potential rather than, from a user standpoint. I think the user doesn't care, right? So, yeah, over to you.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
That funding bit is naturally there, and one has to catch that wave to get your business going. But I think if you look at it in a zoomed out way, when you tokenize something, you create a new asset class which now just doesn't have transactional value but a trading value. That multiplier is amazing, right? Because now that value you have created. So it's a business model, right? When you actually create assets. Because now they don't have just the in-game value, but they have whatever is considered as the trading value or speculative value.
Fair.
So all businesses who are adding that layer, which are allowing assets to be traded, are massively going to multiply potentially the value of their play and game. Therefore.
Okay. Firasat.
Okay. Does this? Yeah. So I feel, yes, it's been a difficult recent past for these initiatives, but then, and like Paavan put it, like differentiate Web3 from crypto and all of that. When I look at it from like 100-kilometer distance, I see that everything that the new age tech brings in to the Indian audiences or the audiences in global, on a global level, sort of always have two main story pegs to cross. One is the talk about the innovation it brings in and the new way of doing things that will kick in the future, and other is that that layer of trading products that Dushyant was talking about. And I feel in the past I could have, like, even if I talk about crypto, I would not be able to tell you which coin is going to make it. But I, as a technology follower, will swear by blockchain as a technology. Right? There's no contention there. As a technology, it stands on its own. It's got a lot of value in the way it does things and handles certain things, which was impossible before. We could see that getting done before, like that, in that kind of efficiency, in that kind of, whether it's about efficiency, whether it's about speed, etc., etc. I look at Web3 in the same way. And that's why I think our tryst with this is going to be interesting, because rather than looking at bringing users to Web3 at Loco, because we're all, our consumers are not really users to us in the first place, because we don't look at them yet as monetizable entities. We still think of our users as fans first. And I feel if the industry sort of leads, leads itself and the various users and the various stakeholders of this ecosystem to approach this entire industry in that manner, that we first start building fan experiences that are more meaningful to fans and sort of sit down in the kind of mind share that the fans expect in the first place. Yeah, in the real world, it's not, if there is an area, you might not be able to gather 200 people without police's permissions, but you can do that on Twitter, right? And the intention is to gather support for something, because all of those people feel for something, right? So I feel because we have an advantage here where we deal with fans and not users, and sort of spend all waking moments thinking about the various pegs of interactability and the various bridges that can be crossed between, you know, fans and the creators that they want to watch. I feel there is a real possibility in exploring things outside, you know, money making in Web3, because I feel that to be the natural evolution of that. Once we have people who have adopted a concept like this in the first place, we're bound to see. Just this morning, actually, we announced a partnership with the Avalanche blockchain to sort of, in this current year, think about the various and work on the various aspects of this, building fan experiences on Loco for the sort of recognition and adoption that we might want to see in the coming years.
Fascinating. All right, I'm mindful of time, so are we taking any questions? Or maybe quick one or two questions? Yeah, please.
Today, gaming environment, gaming companies have quite matured with the age, with the years passing by, and also not just in terms of the business aspect, also in terms of the graphical aspects as well. But then, do you feel that India is ready to handle, India is ready to get into the space of, PlayStations and Xbox, where there are a lot of other sets of, serious gamers in that kind of an environment? And do you feel that makes more of a business sense? Because today, there are a lot of companies in the gaming segment who are getting into a space of casual gaming. Ludo ho gaya, cricket ho gaya, there are a lot of companies. But yes, do you feel that getting into a space of PlayStation and Xbox will give you an edge?
It is a bit of an open-ended question, but I'll try my best to approach it. There's like 20 million consoles in India, from what I understand, and yes, that's like a really small and minuscule number compared to the number of smartphones in India. I have a longer answer to this and I have a shorter answer to this. I don't think in the evolution of things we are going to roll back so much into retaking over the console. But I think, and I feel, that as a country we don't actually quite need to, because we've seen a bunch of evolution without actually, by skipping these steps as well. I believe that we skipped the console, era because of the really great success that mobile internet penetration and smartphones have had in India. But I mentioned earlier how India is like one of the world's greatest laboratories in order to, do these experiments and see what comes out. In the last 1 year, interestingly, I have seen publishers re-adopt their titles to fit the Indian audiences. And this is something that began back in, the mid-20s, when smartphones itself were coming to India, or like the, earlier 2000s. In that time, even though India was at that point of time not the world's largest mobile market, everyone sort of understood that it's going to get there. And basis that, the sort of devices we saw coming into India, the sort of screen experiences, the sort of battery powers, it was not done by retraining the Indian user to behave like a Western or an Eastern user. It was actually done, and I'm saying all of this because I built a smartphone back then in one of the companies that I worked at. What we used to do is to understand what the Indian user wants and refeed back into the product loop and go take it back to the OEMs so that they start changing their devices to suit. So you have to recognize that it's a highly important job to recognize the needs of the consumer and not the other way around. So I don't think we are actually going to go in that direction. I mentioned a lot of advances is because I've been in touch with the most AAA publishers in the world. Some of them have modified their titles to suit low-end devices in India. Last year, a large FPS publisher also introduced an Indian character. something that I had not, ever heard of before. So I believe it's the onus is on the industry to sort of lead the consumer into where they would want to spend their time, and where I think they've got a lot of freedom in order to be able to make these choices right now. And I don't know if anyone else wants to contribute. That's what I feel.
I'll urge you to keep it short.
Yeah, very short. I think everybody should play to their strength. Our strength is mobile gaming. We are the highest, number one, right? 15 billion mobile game downloads. Rank 2 is at 5 billion. We are almost 3 times rank 2. So the future is mobile gaming for India, and that's, I think, every mature player primarily focuses on, at least in the Indian gaming industry.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And I'm sorry, you'll have to take this question offline. I will close the session with certain key takeaways. I think my takeaway number 1 is, of course, regulatory clarity. We're all looking forward to what happens there. Personally interested to see how the competitive dynamic of SRBs plays out. Interested about monetization potential which Web3 can bring. I do believe it's still a hard task ahead of us to convince the regulator that Web3 is more than just crypto. Excited about gamification, commerce outcomes, and lastly, the changing consumer behavior. As Firasat put it, India is probably the biggest laboratory out there. So I think these are some of my key takeaways on the changing landscape of Indian skill gaming. Thank you very much. It's lovely having you here on the panel.